Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Daniel. I'm the owner here at Jesus Carpenter. So we're back now with part 3 of our series on built-in cabinets. In the first 2, we did all the design, we did all the pre-finish work, pre-assembly work, and now we're finally ready on this video to start doing all the assembly. So we'll do some assembly. We're actually going and installing, doing our first round of installation, installing the cabinets, and then we're going to come back and start on some doors. So stick around, and I hope you enjoy this video. Alright, so all the cabinet boxes are constructed, and you can see we don't have face frames yet, so here we are with the face frames, and you can see our designs there. These really take a cabinet from kind of 0 to 60 really quick, and boom, look at that, bam. So it's a big difference over just the cabinet itself. The face frames have these center stiles, and I take these off for finish work, these center pieces, so that I can get paint into the rest of the cabinet a lot easier, and I'll reinstall them at the point of installation. So those markings help me for that. All right, here we are on site doing the install. Okay, so we've transferred our stud markings to the back side of this cabinet. It's easier to mark it from the back, so you don't have to account for the side thickness of the plywood as you would if you're measuring it from like the front, like from the inside. And I've marked where these need to go. I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill this screw through this hole just to make a hole. And then I'll flip this cabinet back right side up, and then I'll go ahead and put these screws about just a little bit in, just enough that they're actually going to stay in the box. That way they're already ready to go. So when Mike and I lift the box into place, basically these can just drive right from the wall and hold that cabinet up. So that's the easiest way we thought to transfer these holes to and install the cabinets to the studs. See, this is a really deep cabinet, so I got my extension ready to go. So when me and Mike will home these cabinets up, I can get in there and install these. I'm just bringing these screws and putting them in just enough to hold themselves in that wood. Okay guys, usually when we install cabinets, we're looking at a depth that's about 24 inches deep off the wall or less, 24, 22, 18. Those are fairly standard depths, but this big boy is 30 inches deep. So because it's so deep, I don't want to rely on that cantilever effect of just doing studs in the back of the box. So I measure for, and I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of cabinet screws here at the front side as well to attach to the sidewall, just to give it some extra strength, especially for this one. This is going to be totally cantilever off the wall, not even resting on the bottom one, but that should give us plenty of strength. 3/4 inch plywood here against those would be great, and I got my screw strips, which is 3/4 inch plywood on the back that are pocket screwed to the sides of the cabinet, so that'll give it plenty of strength. Alright guys, so all the cabinet installation part of this build is complete. These were really difficult cabinets for me and Michael to install, being 30 inches deep and this one being cantilever off the wall. Just made for a lot of challenges. The hardest part really for us was just aligning these cabinets all together to try to make them all level and get these gaps as presentable as possible. When I return, I'll have the doors with me, so I'm going to go back to the shop and make those. And any kind of scribe trim I'll put against the side of the walls here to close these gaps in. I'll caulk where I feel it needs caulk, touch up paint where I feel it needs paint, and obviously at the top I'll install crown. Now you can see I've installed some strips up here, so that gives us some area or canvas, so to speak, to install that crown. The last thing I'll say is, pivot the camera over here, Michael. When you're designing your face frame, you want to design the face frame depth, the width of those boards, so that you'll have enough room to articulate your door. In our case, we're using 1/2 inch European overlay hinges. So that door is going to stop about right here. It's going to 1/2 inch overlay into this face frame, and that gives it about another inch of space to articulate, which is more than enough. So just you know, if you did like a real thin face frame here, you might have problems with door articulation. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your design work. You can see over here, our gapping is pretty extreme, but the reason I designed the cabinets that way so we weren't fighting to get them in. It looks extreme here, but the back corner, it's only about 3/4 of an inch, so quite a bit of racking in your wall. So you want to give yourself some play. We'll put scribe trim down here. You'll never be able to see it at the end. We'll pin it in place, and it will look like it was built in place. So do give yourself some wiggle room space. All right, guys, so we're back at the shop now. Now I'm building the doors. I've got 6 total doors for this project, 4 up top and then 2 for that side cabinet. One of those is a pretty tall door as well. So I wanted something that was very dimensionally stable in terms of door construction for this job. So I'm doing a rear layer of MDF, which is actually 1/2 inch MDF, very straight, true product that's very smooth and paints well. And then I've milled up some 1x4s, prime pine, and I milled those up into these pieces here, which are basically 1/4 of an inch thick by 1 5/8 of an inch thick, just a little bit more than that, almost 1 3/4 inch thick width. And I was able to yield that dimension twice in a 1x4, which is why I went for that width. Now, what I'm gonna do here is I've cut all these prime board pieces to length for the vertical pieces, which we would call the stiles in realms of door construction. For each of the 6 doors, I'm gonna go ahead and sand these down to 180 grit, get a nice flat surface here, but mainly on this inner edge, because once that's affixed to the door, it'll be next to impossible to sand off any kind of like table saw marks or anything like that without marring up the MDF. So this is an area for pre-finished work where we're gonna be doing some sanding first. Then at that point, I will glue each strip and pin nail with 1/2 inch pin nails, all of these strips in place for all the vertical stiles. Once that's done, I'll then cut and measure for door to door to make sure I get the gaps as tightly as possible for all the rails, which are the connecting pieces that run perpendicular to those to connect it and make that true shaker form. I'll do the same thing with those. I'll pre-sand those, pop them in place with glue and brads, and we'll be good to go. One thing I will note is I always do attach these with the prime pine side inward, okay? And the raw side, which is where the table saw ripped, outward. That way during the finishing stage, it's easier to cover those areas with primer. If I had put this side inwards, for instance, trying to load paint with the gun on that inner edge without it running or creating pools or other issues is really next to impossible. So it's better if you attach them in this direction where that prime board is already primed, you get a better finished result. So make sure if you're gonna do this style construction, try to be cognizant of that and keep the raw edges facing on the outward side of the perimeter. All right, I'll be back in a second. Let's see how all this looks when it comes together. We'll have one more detail to add to these doors after we do the shaker style, which I'll show you in a second. Also, you may be asking yourself, like, why did I install the cabinets and then come back to build the doors? It really just depends on the flow of work for that particular day or week. And so I had Michael's help, who was helping me to install the cabinets. They were very heavy and deep, and so no way I could have done those myself. And so I went and installed those while I had his help, and the rest of the job I could easily do solo because it doesn't involve a lot of heavy lifting. So it really just depends on kind of like where you're at and what your flow of work is that week. Okay, so all the doors are trimmed out with that typical shaker aesthetic. I'm giving you some picture-in-picture right now so you can see how those turned out. They turned out great. And if you wanted a straight-up shaker door, all you would do is just caulk all your different seams and go ahead and paint those, and they would turn out awesome. I'm gonna give you another clip now. You can see some built-ins we finished recently for the Martin family, and we did the same exact technique for their doors, just a straight shaker with that same technique, and they came out great. They present very well, very dimensionally stable doors. They paint very smoothly because of the MDF. So it's just a win-win type of way to build a door. For this particular job though, however, we're going to take it one step further, and we're going to be putting some profiled inlay trim inside the shaker to kind of give it a dressier look and to match the cabinets that the clients have in their kitchen for this particular project. So this is some milled up product that I actually got at Lowe's. It's not very expensive at all. It's only about $5 for an 8-foot stick of this. And that does add up over the course of the project. I probably have about $50 or $60 worth of this product for this particular job. But it does, of course, add a really deep look. And of course, the amount of money you pay for the material is saved in labor savings versus you having to make something like that in-house. So the tricky part about this stuff is cutting it. I got to make sure that I'm very careful about how I cut it so I don't crack it with the miter saw. I'm basically going to set up a sacrificial fence of wood against my current fence, which negates, that tearing out effect. and go ahead and cut these into 45-degree angles, moderate angles, and fit them inside the picture frame with the shaker. And I'll come back in a few moments and I'll show you what that looks like, and then we'll be ready to caulk and paint. Alright guys, so I've been working probably about an hour off camera and got all the profile trim cut for the inset inner framing, and it looks awesome. Came out great. Pinnailed everything in place, and so now I'm going to move forward with the next steps of our processes, which is going to be adding some filler through all the different pin nail holes, and then after that is dry, we'll sand it, blow it all off, and we'll start caulking. Just a couple things to talk about. I did want to make mention of this pin nailer. I'm not sponsored at all, don't have any sponsors, but I do really like this Milwaukee Fuel M12 pin nailer. They came with this about a year and a half ago, and at that point, at least to my knowledge, there was not another cordless pin nailer on the market. So this is awesome when this finally came out. It's been a game changer for us, very consistent firing. It does have depth adjustment to it, and just an overall great machine. So that made quick work of all the pin nailing. And also want to talk a little bit about what filler I like to use. I like to use the Elmer's filler. I actually have to get this from Amazon now. Lowe's used to sell this, and that's when I started using it. At that point, it was actually branded as Elmer's Pro Bond stain filter, stainable filler, I believe. And at some point, they stopped carrying the Elmer's and started carrying the Minwax filler. While I love Minwax stains, their wood filler is definitely not my favorite by any means. It has kind of a yellow mustard kind of flavor or color to it. Anyway, and then it doesn't stain well either. It just doesn't stain like the rest of the Minwax stains around it. So that's kind of a fail for Minwax. Hopefully they can fix that. But the stainable Elmer's filler is great. And I like to get it in the smaller tubs, which is the 16-ounce tubs. I used to get the big 32-ounce tubs, but found that even with using it almost daily, by the time we got, halfway through the tub, it was starting to dry out too fast. So I feel like these smaller ones are great. They don't dry out quite as quick. Usually by the time you use them, they've, you got to the end of it, it's about when they start drying out. I also put it in the fridge, which helps to slow down some of that dry time. If they do dry out on you, you can just spray a little bit of water in it and mix it up and you're good to go. Got a nice, very neutral brown color, and it seems to match really well with any kind of wood staining that I do. It dries pretty quick as well. It's just a good product. So I'm using this for the pin nails. I'm not going to use this for anything that I would use to like caulk. And here's the difference. There's some joints here where pin nails are going to get filled with wood filler, but with joints where boards come together, where they can move over time, you want to use caulk, because caulk, of course, moves and stretches. Wood filler, if you use it for these joints, will crack out over time and create a not so very good result. So I'm just doing the pin nails around the perimeter on the pine board, let those dry, and then I'll come and sand them. They dry almost instantly, probably within about a minute. This will be ready to sand. In terms of the pin nail holes that I did for the profile trim, I will actually caulk that because it'll be easier to hit that with the caulk while I'm doing caulk through all these different junctions. And yes, you do have to caulk the top and bottom edge of that profile trim. So when clients ask for that, I do have to charge a labor premium for the profile trim because it does add quite a bit of labor, not just to install, but also on the finish work side of things. And so if you're a craftsman and you're watching this, always be mindful of how much time any change of scope of work is going to take in finish work as well, not just in the time it takes to cut it and put it on. All right, well, let's move forward. Another thing I found you can do to help it not to dry out, or to help it maybe stay somewhat moisture filled as it dries out, is to spray a little water in it before you put it back into the fridge. So that'll help. Okay guys, I wanted to show you how this Kreg European style Hinge cup driller jig works. So basically you got this little piece here that goes in on the edge of the door, and you're gonna clamp it in place. Once you clamp it in place, we have a small hole right here and here where it tells you how to basically perfectly pre-drill for the screws that hold on the hinge. And then at this point, this Forstner bit, which is the exact same size the cup needed for the hole size needed for the hinge, screws into place, and then you basically then drill into your door to make your hole. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how a couple of these work, and that way you can see that process. Okay, so I drilled my cups here, and you can see the hole that makes. And you can also see, I don't know if you can see on the camera, I'll try to get it closer. There are a couple of small holes that are already pre-drilled, and that's what the screws for the hinge will go into. So it's nice to have that already all done, so when you get to the point of install, it makes it a breeze. This is the Kreg jig for this. It does an awesome job. A couple things about this too. It has a measuring kind of ruler here on the edge that helps you know how far inward you want to put those. So for my case, in this case, I did them 3 inches from the edge. I line up with the 3 here, and then I line up with the 3 here, and I actually have that marked with a black permanent marker just to make it easier for me to see and not mess that process up. For me, I set this to dial 3, number 3, which is what is compatible with most of the hinges that I purchase. I've never found a hinge that wasn't compatible with the 3, so maybe that helps you guys too. And I also pre-marked with a pencil the direction with which I wanted the hinges to be for every door. It's always a good idea just to kind of be cognizant of the lamb lines you'll be looking at and the orientation they are when they're hung. And you know, as craftsmen, they all look great, I'm sure, but there's one lamb line on each door that looks better than the other, so you can kind of hand pick, oh, that one's gonna be a vantage point, okay, I want that one to be on the bottom, so I want the hinges on this side. And I kind of did that for all the doors. That way I end up with the right amount of left and right doors with the best vantage point of, you know, the top and the bottom, lamb line being on the bottom. It's going to be the one that you'll see the most, whatever that is. All right, cool. Let's move forward. So I thought while I put this together, I'd just go ahead and yak a little bit about some things that are on mind and maybe share with you guys some information more about our field and kind of some thoughts about things in general of late while I'm doing this, if not only just to kind of give me something to do while I'm doing all these boring tasks, but also to share some information with you. I would say this, always try to do extraordinary work and try to price yourself where you're able to do extraordinary work. And depending on, you know, how the economic climate is at that time, and you know, where your branding is and kind of where your current, you know, product acknowledgement is around your area, will kind of dictate what you're able to charge. We'd all love to get paid a fair wage for what it is that we do. And the truth is, this type of work, really any kind of custom woodwork, takes a lot of time. And what I've seen over, you know, I've been doing this for just a little over 6.5 years now. And one of the things I've seen a lot of companies come and go. And I think one of the reasons that that's the case is because they kind of undervalue themselves in terms of finances. They're trying to price their work at what they think the consumer would want to pay for their work and not necessarily how much time it's really taking them to do it versus whatever their overhead is. And then they end up kind of in doing so, maybe creating a price point that's appeasing for perhaps a greater audience of clients, but in doing so, they're underpricing themselves and they eventually kind of drown. The flip of that, of course, is overpricing yourself and drowning kind of for similar reasons. But you got to find that balance, and you know, it's a tough place to be. But no matter what you charge a client for a job, do the work with the intention of the price point you're wanting to be at. In other words, if you're A+ being the highest price you could get for your craft and F being the lowest, if you're wanting to remain a C-, you know, type woodworker, always getting around C- type pay, then yeah, do C- work. You know, but if you're wanting to get towards, as I think we all are, that kind of A+ mark, then try to do A+ work. Even if, unfortunately, for whatever reason, you weren't able to get, you know, an A+ budget or price on that particular job. Maybe you only were able to grab, you know, C- price just for whatever reason. There could be a gazillion reasons for that. You know, don't do C- work, because then when you do that C- work, not only you're giving that client, you know, not a great product, which is never good, but you're putting that out there in the sea of advertisement. That's the bait you're putting out for other clients to see, you know, through a lens of a picture or a video on Instagram or whatever. And guess what? That bait's what you're going to attract next time. You know, so if you put out C- work, then you're probably going to get clients that are knowingly going to get a lesser quality of work, but are also expecting to pay a lesser price for it. In other words, you're not going to catch those big fish. I've also learned that there are people out there who appreciate good woodwork. And no matter what the economic climate is, there are typically people who either have a high amount of expendable income still, or have been saving their money and still want to use it wisely, but they want to use it on something of high quality. That doesn't mean they're rich. It can mean they're middle class or whatever, but they got enough expendable income, obviously, to afford the product, but they want to do it on something that they deem is worthy, you know? And those are the people that are looking at pictures and that aren't going to haggle you and be a nuisance. And it's like a breeze when you get these people. They're just good people that understand what we do, but they don't come around as often as the others. So, you know, not only do you have to make sure that you can do an excellent product that attracts them, But guys, you got to be patient for them. I'm talking to myself as much as I am to some of you guys out there right now that are listening. Sometimes we make decisions out of urgency because we have to. I've been there. I've done that. I've made jobs I didn't want to take, and I felt like I walked away from the point of sale feeling like I was the one that took the lesser end of the stick there and got kind of taken advantage of. And I've done that sometimes to keep the business afloat. We've all been there. And there's nothing to feel guilty for when you've done that. Sometimes you have to take a lesser job to keep the wheels moving, depending on where you're at, right? But I've also had times where I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it for that little amount of money. You know, your budget's great, and I'm sure it can get you something good with somebody else, but it's not me. You know, and I passed on the job. And then it might be tough at the moment, but I was being patient, not just taking any work to get work. And then something came along that was just bound to happen any minute, you know? And because I waited, my queue was open enough to take on that good job, right? So don't be in such a hurry, you know, just to take on work. It's important that you do good work, and that you do work that honors the Lord no matter what, you know, price point you agree upon with the client. But just some general nature thoughts. And so curious what you guys think about that. I know that probably could just be a separate video, but obviously what we do, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of resources. So you know, you're probably like wondering like how do you do this kind of stuff for a living? It's difficult, especially with the economic climate the way it is right now. And I'm thankful for the business that I do have and have been able to have. But these are some things, some challenges that I think craftsmen that are in our field deal with on a weekly basis. And I just wanted to share those things with you. And you know, the other kind of overarching theme of this whole video series as I'm trying to make it is not only to show you guys how I do what I do, but to show you just how much time it takes to do it. It takes an astronomical amount of time. And so sometimes I think when clients don't like a price, it may not be necessarily that they don't have the funds to pay for that particular price point, but their understanding of what you're doing is underestimated. They don't understand why they can go to Lowe's and get a prefabricated cabinet for such a low price, but then when they come to you, that it's so much more. And you know, you're not a machine, you're not a factory, nor am I intending to compete with a machine or a factory. What we do is entirely handmade, and that's the beautiful thing about it. It's kind of, unfortunately, a dying art because so many people are reaching for those lower price points. And that's why we're in a lot of the issue we are as the economy right now. It's because we've outsourced a lot of our manual labor, our handmade labor, in favor of the machine, either domestic or import, especially import, right? So, you know, that's tough, but when clients can see and hopefully see these videos, and people can see how much work goes into this. Listen, my name's Daniel. I work for Jesus was a Carpenter in Troutman, North Carolina. But there are people all over the nation and world that are doing the exact same things that I'm doing. If they're building you a custom cabinet, they're probably doing the same thing, and it's probably taking them about the same amount of time. I'm no one special, right? So value that time they've priced you for, and know that you're getting not only an extraordinary product that's far reaching beyond what you could have gotten, you know, from a company that manufactures stuff with machines, but know that you're also supporting a small business, which has a value of its own, and it has a story that you can tell someone when they come over and they say, oh, it's a beautiful built tins, where'd you get them? Oh, I got them at Lowe's. No, I got them from, you know, Billy Bobbitt's construction company. There's a story there, you know? All right, that's two. Let's do one more off camera.
Alright guys, that's it for part 3 of our series of built-in cabinetry. We're going to come back soon with part 4. In part 4, we're going to do some paint work, get all of our items painted and finished. We're going to finish the installation and show you guys the final product. So, if you have not done so, please like the video. If you haven't followed the channel, please consider following our channel and hitting the bell so you know about all the future videos. And that really helps us out and helps to get our content out there for more people to see. So, again, thanks so much guys for following along. God bless you, and we'll see you next time.